And welcome back, everybody. Hey, well, it's the Feast of the Visitation, which is a feast that comes to us through the New Testament. And what better person to have on the show to walk us through all the details of the Visitation is our good friend Steve Ray. Steve is a Catholic speaker, author, pilgrimage guide, frequent guest on EWTN. And he also has a acclaimed video series called the Footprints of God video series. He also offers pilgrimages to the Holy Land. You can check out all his great stuff at CatholicConvert.com or the pilgrimage to footprintsofgodpilgrimage.com. And Steve Ray, welcome back to Hands On Apologetics.
Thank you, Gary. It's nice to have this visitation with you today.
Yeah, it is. So how are you doing, my friend? You just recently had some knee work done.
Yeah, it's been 2 months now, and it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. I'm up walking around, but my right knee is a problem child, and we'll see what's going on there. But they say it takes up to a year before you're completely normal and walking, and even then not always normal completely, but we're getting over it.
Good.
2 knees at once was not easy, but I had to do them, get them over with at the same time because of our schedule. So especially with pilgrimages, you do a ton of walking. Yep.
So,
and that's a brutal operation. I didn't know what hit me when I got up. Woke up from that, and still you keep saying, boy, I think I made a big mistake. But my knees are getting worse, and I wasn't going to be able to keep doing what I did unless I just fixed them. So, and that's on one thing. And the other good thing is my book on Genesis is coming out this summer with Ignatius Press. It's about 500 pages. I know you read one of the very original manuscripts of it and gave a lot of good comments and so on. So my appreciation for that. But they've already got the cover made and all the endorsements on the back. And it's going to be published, I hear. It's at the printer now. So The endorsers on the back were John Bergsma, Al Cresta, Jimmy Aiken, Tim Staples, and Mary Healy.
Wow. Yeah, beautiful.
So some nice names there that they put on the back for me. So,
and that's going to be through Ignatius Press, right?
Ignatius Press, yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It took long enough. I was all this time waiting for it to come out because it's going to be a great resource to have on your bookshelf. Yeah.
It's 500 pages, and I don't know of any other commentaries on Genesis standalone that's out in the last 50 years or so. It's I mean, there are some in series or in one volume things, but this is Catholic. It's a very Catholic one, quoting Jewish rabbis and Catholic, the church fathers and a lot of things like that. I just finished by saying that the main editor gave me a great compliment at Ignatius Press. She's been there over 40 years as their main editor. She said, Steve, I had a real problem editing your book. She said, I'd get going and 10 pages into it. I'd say, oops, I'm supposed to be editing. I've just been reading and enjoying this book. She said, I'd have to go back 10 pages and remember that I'm supposed to be editing this thing. So she said, as soon as it's done, I'm going to curl up on the couch and read it from cover to cover because it was such a good book, she said.
Wow. Yeah. And that's a commentary. I mean, you can't really say that about every commentary.
I know.
I had the same problem, though, when I was reading it, too. It was a little hard to be critical because you're such an engaging writer and you have so many great insights that it's hard to not to get swept up, in the story.
And I've been there, so it was fun to bring out my experiences with the Bedouins and what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived like, because they were like the Bedouins today out with their sheep and flocks. And I like to make it personal and tell a lot of stories, but also to get into the nitty gritty of the Hebrew words and why in the world would God ask Abraham to offer his son? Isn't a human sacrifice a wicked, evil thing to do? Why would God do that? So there's a lot of things to discuss there. And it's the most important book of the Bible. I can easily say that because without the book of Genesis, we don't know where we came from, who we are, how the world got here. That book lays the foundation for every other book in the Bible, the whole Catholic faith, and everything we know about the world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite a large book too. So
it's the second longest book in the Bible, 50 chapters. And Ignatius told me I had to reduce it by 100 pages. I said, I said, they said, can't you make it shorter? I said, this is the second longest book of the Bible. I said, it's kind of hard to make it short. But then that begs the question, what's the longest book of the Bible? And that's Jeremiah.
Yeah. Very good. All right. So talk about, being there. Let's talk a little about the visitation in the Gospel of Luke, because, obviously Luke wasn't there when Mary visited Elizabeth. So how does he know all these details?
My guess is that Luke, and he begins his gospel by saying that he's gathered all the traditions and all the stories and the information and compiled it into an organized format for a man named Theophilus, who we don't know who that is, but he put together this, collected all the information and put it together in a historical format for him. So how would he know about Mary? Well, he could have learned a lot of that actually from Elizabeth. You don't have to say that he actually learned it all from Mary, but there are indications there that he would have had to interview Mary. So I can see him out sitting under a date palm tree during the early morning when it's cooler, and with his he's a writer, obviously. He wrote the book of Luke and Acts, and a historian and a physician. I can see him with that quill scratching across the parchment as Mary very carefully tells him the story of what she did. And he has to be selective. He can't tell the whole story because it would have been a whole book just in itself. So he's very selective and edited it down so that we got the important aspects of Mary's life. So really those first two chapters are Mary's story. And if you want to read the story of Joseph, you read Matthew. The angel actually came to Matthew 3 times. He only came to Mary once in Luke. So if you want to read Joseph's side of the story and the birth of Christ, you read Matthew. If you want to read Mary's side of the story, you read Luke. And then you put the two together and you get the whole story.
Yeah,
and by the way,
go ahead.
Mary left Nazareth. She's about 15 years old. She's just been given this incredible announcement by the angel, and that's when the incarnation took place. People think that happened in Bethlehem. It did not. Even on the altar in Nazareth, where the angel came to that cave, we take our group down to pray the first mystery of the rosary. That's the cave. That's right where the angel stood, right there, I tell everybody. He talked to Mary, 15 years old, lived in a cave, no running water, nothing, very rustic. And he told her she's going to give birth to a son. She said yes. And on the altar there, it says, the word became flesh here. I get goosebumps every time I see that. The word became flesh here. I'm standing at the very place where the word became flesh. And when he became flesh, it says that first of all, it says the most poignant part of the Annunciation to me is where it says, and then the angel left her. Nobody pays attention to that verse. That's how it concludes. And then the angel left her. Well, how does a 15-year-old girl process what she just heard? So she's the Immaculate Conception. Doesn't mean she's God. She doesn't know everything. This was a surprise to her. It even said she was afraid because the angel said, no, don't be afraid. And she was concerned about what sort of greeting this would be. And then the angel left her. And he didn't come back every day and send her updates on Facebook and have a coffee with her. And she had to live by faith like the rest of us, trying to figure out all that meant what the angel just said. And then it says she made haste to go visit Elizabeth. She went to Ein Kerem, which is about 4 miles west of Jerusalem. It's like a subdivision of Jerusalem, out in the countryside, up in the hill country. Nobody wanted the priest. Zechariah is a priest. He didn't want to stay in Jerusalem. They had country villas where they lived. They were wealthy, these priests, back in those days. And in Jerusalem, just imagine a walled city, 100 degrees in the summer, no plumbing, animals walking everywhere in the city. Can you imagine the smell? No breeze. Can you imagine what it would have been like in Jerusalem? It would have been horrendous. It'd make your eyes water, just the ammonia probably smell in the air. So these rich guys, they had their villas up in the hill country where Mary went to visit Elizabeth. She was a very wealthy woman. And he only went into Jerusalem to do things when he needed to do it. So anyway, Mary walks about 100 miles to go visit Elizabeth. That's a long way for a girl to walk. Couldn't have gone by herself, had to go with a group because it was dangerous to travel alone in those days, and she's only a young girl. So she travels there about 100 miles, And it said she made haste. So let's say she took 5 days to pack her little suitcase, get her little sandals and everything ready to go. And then it took her 5 days, morning to night, to get there. That's 10 days. So how big was Jesus in her womb in 10 days? Well, we always see pictures of Mary very pregnant when she arrives to see Elizabeth, but it wasn't that way at all. They only do that to emphasize the fact she was pregnant. The reality is that you would not have been able to see what was in her womb with the naked eye. You would have needed a microscope. And yet, what did Elizabeth say? The mother of my Lord has come to me. John the Baptist leaps when he had in the presence of God in the flesh there in Mary's womb. So that is a very strong pro-life argument, because already in Mary's womb, you can't see it with the naked eye, but it's already 100% God and 100% man.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a fantastic insight, because I think in our imaginations, like you said, the iconography is that Mary's very pregnant, right?
Yeah.
So Elizabeth's exclamation would be just, from her own observation almost, and of course John the Baptist leaped in her womb, but that's not the case.
Yep. And maybe the angel told Elizabeth that Mary was coming too, just like the angel told Mary that Elizabeth had a baby. Or Mary might have told her, but it seems like it was when she first saw her, she just was filled with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit told her. So yeah, but whatever the case was, there was a lot going on there. Now, when Mary arrives at Elizabeth's, Luke tells us this nice little story about her greeting, and that Mary stayed with her for 3 months, and then there's the Magnificat where Mary bursts into song. And by the way, that is a Mary's version of Hannah's Magnificat in 1 Samuel chapter 2. When Hannah had baby Samuel, she burst into song. John Paul II said that's the Magnificat of the Old Testament. Mary bursts into song at the Magnificat of the New Testament. And if you look at Mary's, she knew her Bible, because she was basing hers on Hannah's. She just kind of reworked it a little bit to fit her own circumstances. But what is interesting, Gary, and I know you know this, so we're just saying this for the audience, is that Luke is telling a nice story of the visitation, but there's a lot more to it that he's trying to do, because he's embedded in that story a whole nother level of information, and he is trying to tell us who and what Mary is, who she is and what she is. And you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear, or to be a Jew. Because if you're Jewish and you know your Old Testament Torah and the Old Testament, their Bible, you would know that comes from 2 Samuel chapter 6. And when I take my groups there, I always say to people, now, I just read to you the story of the visitation. How many of you immediately thought of 2 Samuel chapter 6? Nobody raises their hand. I'll tell you why when we get back.
All right. We're talking to Steve Ray, talking about the visitation. More to come right after this.